And welcome to our Crosstalk podcast. Labor Day has happened, and we are here to talk about topics. And as Brian Beveridge works on my microphone, and Joe Deloach gets ready to tell us how things really are, we are happy to have you watch and listen and be a part of our podcast. We are going to talk about teamwork. They say teamwork makes dream work, and I think football season kind of makes us think about teams, and certainly working on teams makes you think about teams, and there's good teams and bad teams, and why are teams, some teams good and some teams not. So, Brian, what do you think about teamwork?
Well, teamwork is what makes everything function the way it's supposed to, and it actually makes, when you work together, it comes out better than it would if you work on it by yourself. So teamwork to me is one of the most important things that we can, in any organization, can deal with, is teamwork. Whether it be even family at home, to your church, to even at work, at your job. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's one of the things that the disciples had to learn too, was working together as a team, and not just, well, God sent me here. It's not just a us mission. It's a, it says in the Bible, the body's many members, not just one. Mm-hmm. So if you think about it, you got 2 feet. If you only had 1 foot, you had to hop.
So what constitutes a team? I guess that's a good question. A good first question.
To me, it's more than one person. So it could be 2 or more.
Sure.
And that person doesn't have to be visible. Because I like to think one of the best examples of teamwork is your relationship with God. You're working with God to fulfill His plan. And to me, that is the primary team right there. I know in my life it is. Because He and I argue back and forth a lot. So
you don't argue with God?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
Does God always seem to win?
And I'm sure He laughs. Because I'm telling him, look, you just got this wrong.
How in the world am I here in this moment, in this time?
Why do you do this? Come on now.
Exactly.
And he usually answers. But so to me, teamwork has got to be 2. You have to have someone. Also, it helps to have somebody else's mind. 2 heads are better than 1.
Oh, yeah.
Other people's suggestions. Division of labor. You can get more done with a teamwork than doing it by yourself. It's better on you. You don't burn yourself out. You don't become so tired because you feel like you have everything on your shoulders. But teamwork is hard for someone to do who is very, I'll do it myself.
Yeah.
You know, it's hard to delegate authority or to delegate, because you aren't, do they do it? Do they do it? Are they going to do it? But I think it's the most effective way in anything. It really is.
And so I'll tell you one of my ideas of I wouldn't say perfect team because none of us in this room are perfect, but we make a good team, all three of us. Because even if it's just me and David sitting in the office, I can bounce ideas off of him.
That's right.
And he'll shoot back ideas, and sometimes we sit there and I'm sure he thinks this boy's crazy. And like with the youth, me and you'll sit there and bounce ideas back and forth, and it just, that to me, that's what teamwork is not saying, well, my idea is better than your idea, but still having an open mind too, to where you can listen and not knock down the other person that's working with you.
And to be a good team player, you have to be willing to do your part and not sit there and say, well, they didn't do it and I'm doing more than them. You give up yourself.
Right.
And to me that.
And sometimes you pick up a lot more slack than you want to, but it's to help lift up the other team member.
Yeah.
I know quarterbacks, I always think about football, and quarterbacks are always they're sort of the by default team leader. And I think I was watching a documentary yesterday, or I guess I was watching part of a documentary yesterday about Tom Brady, and I didn't realize how slow the guy is. Like, he's slow, he's skinny and gangly, he doesn't really throw that great. He has all the all the things that you're supposed to be good at as a leader. He's really not that good at. But what he was good at he is good at. He's still around, 43 years old, 44, still playing.
A baby.
He's just a mere baby playing football still. He's able. The intangibles were that he was able to convince the rest of the people around him that they needed to do more to get to where they needed to go. And I love to watch football, mostly because I'm an offensive lineman, and I notice the little intangibles that most people don't. Most people watch the quarterback if they like to watch football, they always watch the quarterback and the wide receivers and the running backs. But none of that really is any good unless those quiet guys up front, are doing their job. And if they're doing their job really good, it makes everybody else look really good. And I think that working together, working in a community, a church working together, to bring it back full circle, like when a congregation is working together, it's usually the intangibles that are happening. It's the things that you think the quarterback, or in this case like the preacher or the staff or the whoever leaders of the church, lay leaders of the church, you think, whoa, those are great leaders, but really what happens is it's the intangibles to get everyone else to lead. And that's the thing. I think that's the magic, quote unquote, of a team, is that those who maybe otherwise would never see themselves as leaders begin to lead.
Right. And see, the one question that falls back into too, what happens when you have more than one team working on one project? Do they become one team, or are they still separate?
That's right. Then is it about us, or is it about them?
Right.
Who's it about?
Okay.
Is it about the people beyond the walls?
Well, it's just like in church. You have what's the purpose of the church? But then you have the youth, you have Methodist men, you have Methodist women. There's so many different segments, and everybody gets real possessive of their own. I think that's some of the biggest faults we have. That's mine. What are you doing in my territory, my space? And we forget what we're here for. We're supposed to be working together.
The U.S. military has always been perceived as powerful, or at least in the last 100 years or so, powerful and mighty and I guess athletic and able, but they weren't. I'm not in the military, but it's my understanding that there are other elite forces across the world. But what makes the American experience of military different has been the adaptability. So I think of a person has to be faithful and teachable. Likewise, a team, I think, has to be faithful and teachable. I always heard that acronym, FAT. To lead, you have to be fat. and that's a good acronym to, or mnemonic device to faithful and teachable. But so the Army has always been a very adaptable group of people, at least the United States Army, and they are taught to be adaptable. They're taught to understand, there's a chain of command, but at the end of the day, you have to make a decision for the well-being of your people, and you have to look to the left and look to the right, and preserve their lives. Like you're here to defend the man to your left and the man to your right, and that changes how a team works when everybody understands that they are essential.
Well, even down to the man that's cleaning the toilets and dumping your trash is always just as important as the guy that's leading the group.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I was always taught growing up. It don't matter if you're dumping trash or if you're the CEO, you're just as important.
Yep.
Because even the guy dumping the trash, if you don't dump the trash, you can't do your job.
Mm-hmm. The teamwork, I think, the magic, I keep using that word, but the sort of the effervescence that no one can seem to put their finger on, and if they could, they'd probably make $1 gazillion on it, is that the people, you have to somehow figure out how to motivate the people all across the board, whether their responsibility is trash detail or their responsibility is to write a sermon, or their responsibility is to make sure that the money is counted. And no matter who you are, or audio visual, they have to make sure that the sound gets done right. Like all these things everyone has to be motivated. And in the church, I think we're prone to it. We're prone to, just like all humans, we're prone to sort of take it all for granted.
Yep.
Well, see, in working in multiple different, I was a secretary at one of the other churches I was at, so I had to do a lot of the secretarial stuff about sending letters and writing to other churches. And then when I came here, I got on the worship committee and different committees here. You start seeing everybody on that committee works together, but then usually the director or the people at the committee are like, well, this is my toy, I'm going to keep it, nobody can touch it. Mm-hmm. And then you had the other committee that's like, well, that was our toy 2 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
We want it back. Mm-hmm. And then there's a fight and a power struggle. And it's not saying anything about the pastor, but it starts with your upper leadership, and it goes all the way to the bottom.
Well, if what's being exhibited at the top, or at I shouldn't say the top, but sort of at the microphone, let's just say that, because I don't think of it. I know that we think of top down, down up, but I think organizationally, like those who have the most influence, whoever they are, if we become whoever we are, if leadership of a team becomes self-motivated, right? If a leader, whoever he or she is, exhibits their own brokenness, their own sort of weakness, they try to overcome their own insecurities, whatever it may be. I mean, whether it's Adolf Hitler or Donald Trump or Joe Biden, no matter, or a bishop or a pastor, or a director of ministries, whoever that may be, if they begin to do it to feed themselves, then it becomes very divisive. Mm-hmm. Because then the people read that insecurity, and some of them don't catch it and others do. The ones that do maximize on it, and they become like, I'll be your right hand man, I'll be your right hand gal.
Right.
And suddenly what the motivation is about, nothing of what it was supposed to be about. And I will give credit to the United Methodist Church. In California, back in the 70s, they began the annual conference, the Cal Pacific annual conference began to do psychological evaluations on all their candidates for ministry. And there was this man named Jim Jones, who from San Francisco, who was a Methodist. And in order to become a clergy person, he was given the opportunity to go take a psychological evaluation. And they found out pretty quickly that he was a narcissist sociopath. Mm-hmm. And he was denied access to become a minister. And so what happened to Jim Jones? Jim Jones went off and started his own church of Jim Jones.
And everybody drank Kool-Aid.
It wasn't even Christianity. He used the gospel sort of motions and modes, and he used gospel, the 20th century gospel sort of emotionalism, to create his own something in San Francisco. And I guess only in San Francisco it would work, but we know what happened, and it morphed into this
It turned
monster.
Everybody mass suicide.
Right. So
Too
this is
late.
a great example. And I mean, we could go back to Adolf Hitler, who obviously took an entire nation that way. But here's a same exact sort of narcissistic sociopathy that took a team to drinking Kool-Aid with poison.
Right.
You know?
That's right.
So that's a really extreme example, but at the same time, like there are subtleties of who we are as leaders or as followers that somehow allow this to pervade. And I don't know how else to say it except it better be for the well-being of those around you.
It's like Ms. Linda was saying that it takes a team to succeed. That was
Together, everyone achieves more.
right.
But
And
you can accomplish more with a team than you can by yourself.
right. And it lightens the load, like Joe was saying. It makes it where it's not as hard to bear. We talk about bearing our cross, bearing our burdens. If you carry the burdens by yourself, even if it's just talking, even having to talk to somebody, to me that's even still teamwork. If you're standing up with someone and you're willing to mentor and counsel with them and talk to them,
Yeah.
to me that's still a form of teamwork.
The intangible, I'm not saying I'm an expert at any of this, but the intangible that I observe is trust. There's got to be trust.
You've got to trust your members of your team.
And if you can't trust your left and right side, that they're not, if you can trust them positively, that you can continue to maneuver forward, as long as we communicate, and that person to your right and that person to your left and the one right behind you, that they will support you or correct you.
But you said one of the big key important words: communicate.
Yeah.
And that's where I feel I love this church dearly, but we fall short on all our committees and all our departments about communication.
Yeah.
And even I'm bad about not communicating with what goes on in the sound room, because I get in my own little domain and world, and it's like, okay, this is, I know how to make this work. This is, and that's one thing I miss about Boyd, because he'd just appear in the office and say, what's going on?
Yeah.
He'd pop up in the sound room, all the lights come on, and be like, what's going on? And we'd sit and talk. But it's the other part too is some of the committees, they don't know who to go to.
Right.
And that's another thing we need to communicate out is this committee needs to work with this committee
Sure.
so they don't overlap each other.
Well, I think the trust, if you're talking about our specific community, like there's trust issues that probably go back years, and I probably
Centuries.
can only, yes, perhaps centuries, I can only scratch the surface on. And when we think about the team of Putnam County, I mean, we know that it's a fractured team. It's a team with scars, right?
Right.
And without pointing fingers, because if I point one finger towards somebody, I've got three pointing back at me. I will say just in general that, yeah, the communication has broken down, probably in our country. The communication, when we've gotten so isolated on our phones. I mean,
That's
these
right.
phones, these phones and televisions, it really is a television. It's a small television. It's a powerful little,
We've almost lost the art of conversation.
right.
Well, that's like 90% of America doesn't know how to actually write a form letter anymore. I mean, we're I hate to say this is another topic,
Text
but
messages,
we're
but it
dumbing
is-
America down.
But that is a separating of the team.
I have seen the ill effects of not having a team, especially in teaching school.
When just to add one more hill to that debility, when you put us into a fear-driven sort of separation through pandemic, when we were told to lock down and isolate, we not only became less communicative than we already were, but we became unable to trust the person even next door to us because we couldn't go see them,
Right.
or even family members.
Well, the other thing too is if you look at neighborhoods, I've been to neighborhoods where people don't know their neighbor.
Yeah.
And I mean, I asked one time here in discipleship class, how many of you, and I mean, there's like 20 people in the class. Well, probably not 20, but about 10 to 15. And it was sitting in that room, and I asked, how many of y'all know two neighbors down from your house in either direction?
Right.
Like, well, I know my next door neighbor. I'm like, no, I said two neighbors down.
Luckily, one of mine is Bob Betzel, and I know him pretty well. Not
Oh yeah.
extremely well, but I know him well enough because he's a member of the church.
Oh, yeah. And see, like with me, I know everybody that lives on the road I live on. I've been to their house. I grew up with them,
Sure.
so I know them. But there's other, like when I lived over here in Edenton, I didn't know any of my neighbors because I was in my own little hole and I was
Same way.
in my life, and that's all I.
I was like that in Athens. We didn't know all the people around us, and it was like they were all so secluded from each other that if you knocked on their door, they thought you wanted something.
right.
Or selling something.
Yeah, like well, I'm the guy across the street, trick or treat. But therein lies the real sickness of our community, not our church necessarily, but just the society we live in, that we've been sort of divided and therefore debilitated. So teamwork is so important, and communication, I think, is the first step to overcoming those
And
debilities.
see, I think denominations don't exhibit good teamwork. I mean, I think in our community we work well with others, but there's some churches will not associate with another church,
That's right.
and yet what's the ultimate goal of all churches?
That's right. That's right.
So we ought to all be a team working
Our
together.
witness to the world is: will you even get along with yourself?
Yeah.
Like I don't want to be a part of that family if you can't even have a meal with each other.
Well, I have a person who said that he would not join the church. He says because they don't know who they are and what they want,
Yeah,
and so
that's right.
he withdrew. But communication is easy to talk about and hard to do.
Right. And see, you talking about the denominations working together. To me, it says in the Bible, in Ephesians chapter 4, it talks about one faith, one baptism, one Christ. That's what God wants us to get back to, is that one faith, one baptism, one Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And the churches are, it's like there's a power struggle between churches.
Well,
There has
And-
been, yeah.
we had a communion Sunday, and I sat there and thought, the first time I saw tinctures where you dip the,
Yeah,
I thought that's the
tinction.
weirdest thing I've ever seen in my life. And there's some people that, and then, oh no, you don't do it that way. You have to go to the altar and kneel. And then there's some people that you have to bring it to me in the pew. And I'm thinking, what difference does it make?
Well,
Sure.
see, growing up, I
Doesn't-
always used to the brass plates with the little glass shot glasses.
Oh yeah.
But we always thought we were, high and fancy because and when they say like the wine part, we thought, oh man, that's real wine when we were kids.
Go to the Lutheran church.
Yeah, we found out it wasn't wine.
Well,
We
Lutheran
found
church it is.
Like great
The
juice.
one I was at, it was the,
Christian Brothers,
let me tell you, it wasn't the
18%.
most expensive wine either. It was like,
They got table wine because it's antiseptic.
It was some of that vinegar.
I tell you, it's like they
In
must-
the Anglican church, it's Christian Brothers. It's 18%. It's table wine and it's antiseptic.
oh my word.
They don't so that it kills the germs. Like
Yeah.
so, if you put your little stinky finger in there, it's apparently antiseptic.
It's, I never would have thought about it. You just said that when you in the Baptist church, and, yeah, they bring it to you. You pass the
Yeah, you get a little plate of crackers, like the little saltine,
Yeah.
like oyster cracker things, and then you get a little shot glass.
I have a cousin that would not take communion at the Baptist church because she said she didn't want to eat something everybody else had pawed over.
Well, we had one guy that
Please.
Oh,
he wouldn't take communion because it wasn't, the oyster crackers obviously are not unleavened bread, so he wouldn't take communion.
So there we go. We split hairs,
it's so ridiculous.
and we do it. We do it in this church. This church does it with other churches. But again, teamwork is what it's all about. I mean, at the end of the day, when our day's all in,
It is really sad that we would ultimately find ourselves in our own community believing in the same God and worshiping the same God, and then somehow create us and them
yeah.
in our own community. When we get to the kingdom of heaven, is it going to be? It's
Us
not
and
going to
them?
be. It's not going to be us and them.
Well,
If we get there, it's going to be
think
us.
I think the
and
joke
God.
about guy dies and goes to heaven, and St. Peter's showing them around, and they go into the different mansions. This is the Presbyterian, this is the Baptist, and this is the Methodist. And they get to one, and he says, "Shh, quiet. Can't talk loud." They said, "Why?" Because they think they're the only ones up here. I don't think it matters. I really don't.
Well, the other thing too, we always fight back and forth about the way we worship,
Yeah.
because you got churches that, and not just in other denominations, but even here in like the Methodist movement, that they actually have more contemporary stuff. They do more contemporary stuff, like songs. It's the same hymns, but they do it with a more upbeat tune. And then you have churches that look down on them because they're not playing the same hymns. They play the same way. They're not, you know. And I know I harp on the thing about people reading the wrong version of the Bible at 11 o'clock. But the only reason I do that is because it doesn't match up on the screen.
Sure.
You know,
It's always something, though, Brian.
right. I always have something that backfires with that. But that's the only reason I complain about that is because it doesn't match up on the screen.
I hear you.
But to me, if you're worshiping God, you're not taking away from God. You're not changing the Bible. What does it matter about the style of music as long as it's not taking away or changing the Bible?
It
Well,
doesn't matter.
if you're on God's team, you work with other players.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, and I think we lose that. We really do.
And so that's where, you know, in the Bible it talks about everyone was given a talent.
Well, that's true.
And some of these kids are given talents, and we're not using their talents because we're saying, well, you have to do it this way. And their talent's not that way. Their talent's a complete different
Sure.
opposite
I
set.
use that parable so much in teaching school, especially students that struggle with schoolwork. God did not give us all the same
That's right.
brain ability. There's some kids that's academic work comes very easy.
Oh, I was not very academic.
There are
I
other
was-
people that have to work hard at it, and there's some it's a struggle. I mean, it is.
And I was on the struggle side.
Well, I was at the other end. It came easy because that's all I did. But then again, a lot of the kids on the struggling end have other strengths. Like they're usually friendlier. They're usually able to very adaptable, very flexible. You
Well,
know.
the great irony in our society right now is that college educated philosophers, if you will, are not going out into the workforce with any skill set. Guys who probably weren't book smart are coming back with HVAC technology, and they're making, you know, hand over
Yeah.
fist. So there is such a difference. It doesn't matter that you're talented in one thing or the other so much as that everybody there's supply and demand for everybody. There's a need
Right.
for everyone.
And that's
On
a
the team.
lot of young people, what youth, they're trying to find their talent.
Right.
I mean, when I was 21 and decided that I wasn't going to go to med school and that I was going to teach school, I felt that was my talent.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me a long time to figure out it was my talent, you know. But that was God led. Teamwork is so important because if you don't work on a team, you end up trying to do it all,
And you can't.
and you end up doing a poor job.
And you can't.
You can't.
People will let you do it for a
Oh,
while.
oh yeah, I'm perfect
They'll let you
example.
fail all by
When I
yourself.
left Putnam County, the secretary said, Miss Loach, if you had refused to do all that, which I worked 24 hours a day, they'd have got you some help. They wasn't going to hire anybody when you end up killing yourself doing it. And she's right. And you don't do as good a job. But
So I would love for us to finish with just saying let's all work towards being a team,
I'm a
wherever-
team player.
wherever that may be, and not see ourselves as leaders and followers, but see ourselves as members of a team.
Oh, yeah. I want to say one more thing.
One part of
That
the
kind of goes with that I learned from going through the whole journey of starting the local licensed pastor part is you can't serve and lead. You can't lead without serving.
right.
That's right.
So if you're a team leader, you still have to serve that team as well as the other teams and whatever group you're with.
That's right.
You can't just be a leader and say, well, this is how it's going to be. You have to be able to serve and lead at the same time.
Not if you want your teammates to care about
See,
you.
that's what happens in education a lot. They put an administrator in who has never taught school a day in their life. And they're sitting there telling you what to do, and you think, you know.
That's exactly right. Same thing with officers, pastors, superintendents, bishops.
Can
I
you
mean,
be a
it's the same
pastor
way.
and never preach?
There are a lot of pastors who find their way to associate roles that don't preach on a regular Sunday.
And, you know, they could be, anyway. I'm big on that, yeah. Yes,
That's right.
we had a man here who started a trailer plant, and anybody who went to work for him when he started, he put them on the line, and then he worked them all the way up. That way they knew the
Sure.
whole.
There are soldiers that never. There are officers that are generals that never fought.
Yeah.
They just sat in an office in the Pentagon. You know. I mean, what a. I'm not going to listen to that guy if I'm
No,
out there in the
That's
dirt.
right. That's right.
Well, have a wonderful rest of your week. I hope this was encouraging for you. We're going to inside this room. We're going to continue to try to be a team, a better team, and we hope that you'll walk with us as part of your team in community and part of the congregation, the community, and the kingdom. God bless you. Have a good day.